It's just the front.
No worries. Thanks. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, as mentioned, I'm a scientist from SA Water. SA Water is the government body responsible for drinking water and wastewater treatment in South Australia. As I could see, we'd be potential end users of a lot of the information presented in the first 2 days of this course. The more I know about bloom dynamics and the ability to get rapid analysis of what's happening in those blooms in real time would help us make decisions in the treatment plant to optimise the removal of cyanobacteria and their metabolites. For this presentation today, what I've decided to do is go back and look at some of our data and research over the last 20 odd years to sort of tell a story of how drinking water treatment has evolved in South Australia and the decisions that were made for the building of different or new treatment plants over that time. I'll just acknowledge Gail Newcomb. Gail was responsible for a lot of the work or overseeing a lot of the work to do with cyanobacteria research and drinking water treatment. And Gail's put her feet up and has retired. So she's enjoying, I guess, the fruits of her labour. But we'll carry on. South Australia is a dry state. We depend on surface water for supply. The 29 treatment plants that use surface waters in South Australia, 28 of them can experience cyanobacterial blooms. And they supply roughly about 1.5 million people. Typical reservoirs in South Australia, these are supply reservoirs in metropolitan Adelaide, and there's other reservoirs that feed those as well. So it's about 20 across the state. In a typical year, they'll supply 60% of water in Adelaide. During drought, only about 10 to 20. So we pump a lot of water from the River Murray. The River Murray is an essential supply for our regional customers, and it's just shown there the Murray-Darling Basin. So we're at the end of that. So whatever happens in Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria, we get the end product. There's major pipelines that feed regional parts, Morgan Whaler, Swan Reach, Taylor and Benkeith, and the Adelaide, Mannum and Onkaparinga pipelines feed Metro Adelaide. That's just a picture of one of the various pipelines that stretch out to regional South Australia. Along the River Murray, there are 22 water treatment plants feeding both local towns and also those pipelines that I mentioned. And they stretch from Renmark, just over the border from New South Wales, to Tailem Bend, right down near the Murray mouth. For us, the most major issue with cyanobacteria is the taste and odour compounds, MIB and geosmin, the earthy, musty taste and odour compounds. Threshold for some people could be as low as 10 nanograms per litre. So our treatment plant needs to be really efficient for their removal. And just an example of some of the data there from Morgan Water Treatment Plant on the River Murray just shows the challenging nature of the taste and odour compounds that we experience. Health-wise, there's cyanotoxins as well, which have been spoken about quite a bit during this workshop. In terms of multi-barrier approach from an SA South Australia context, in terms of catchment, we can't really do a hell of a lot. As you saw, a lot of our catchment is the Murray-Darling Basin and the Adelaide Hills. There's agriculture, etc., that goes on in there. In terms of source water, we can do a little bit with aeration in some reservoirs. One reservoir, they still dose copper sulphate, and another reservoir, we've got some avoidance where we can move the intake for the treatment plant up and down the water column. Where it all happens for us is in the treatment process. We rely on solids removal with coagulation, sedimentation, filtration. We rely on absorption for removal of the soluble metabolites, and also biodegradation in filters as well. So these are fairly well established, but there's still room for further possible optimisation. We've got oxidation all through the natural disinfection processes as a final barrier for toxin removal if required. Two important aspects in terms of treatment of cyanobacteria and the metabolites is the removal of what's contained in the cell, intracellular, and the material dissolved in the water, extracellular. Different processes for different where the material is, or the toxins or taste and odour compounds. I guess the first phase of drinking water treatment in South Australia occurred between 77 and 95, where actually Adelaide received filtered water for the first time through the building of those treatment plants. Apart from Iponga, which is a dissolved air flotation filtration process, they're all conventional, what we call conventional coagulation, flocculation, sedimentation, clarification and filtration. So in these plants, we're relying on, for the removal of intracellular cyanobacteria or the cells, we're relying on that coagulation, flocculation, sedimentation process. Here we see some cyanobacteria, the algae formerly known as Anabaena circinalis, in that algal material in an alum floc, and you can see the activated carbon which was actually in that sample at the time. But what we found is if you optimise your treatment process for the removal of organic matter, you will obtain the optimum removal of cyanobacterial cells. And we talk about optimum removal for NOM, or natural organic matter, and we can measure that by UV absorbance. If you're removing greater than 80 to 90% of the coagulable organic matter, you optimise for your cyanobacteria removal. Not all organic matter is removed with coagulations. There's always some recalcitrant component. Hence we measure it as percent coagulable. Just some data from Happy Valley Water Treatment Plant. Here we've got algal cells, both cyanobacteria and the total in the inlet water. It's up to about 1.2 million cells per mil. Over a period of time was the highest. And in our settled water, we've got the data there corresponding to the inlet water. Over time, collating that data, we were able to remove, on average, about 80% of total algae and 84% cyanobacteria through that coagulation, flocculation and sedimentation process. I haven't put any filtered water data because didn't find any cyanobacteria or algae in the filtered water. Focusing on a couple of different algae. First one, Dolichospermum circinale, the problematic one that produces geosmin for us. Cell numbers aren't very high because we dose copper sulfate. The source water managers don't like the cell numbers to get too high, so 3,000, one got away from them there. If we look at settled water concentrations, the highest one's about 65, 70, and more often than not removing all the algal cells in the treatment process prior to filtration. Some summary data of different cyanobacteria and algae. So Dolichospermum, that's the summary of that data that I just showed there, about 96% removal, or it's just shown there as a fraction. Some other ones, Pseudoanabaena, Cyanodictin, because we had enough sort of data in the monitoring program to make some assessments of those, and also Chlorella is just an example of another algal species. So what we found for waters with turbidity greater than 10, say the River Murray, turbidity removal in the settled water or after sedimentation is a good indicator of percent removal, but not a good indicator of cell numbers. And as I mentioned, if you can optimise treatment process for organic matter removal, you're doing a really good job in terms of cyanobacteria removal. Turbidity aids in the settling and promotes higher cell removals. Typically low turbidity waters can give lower cell removal, and in cases, even if you're removing 98%, you may still have some concerns. Extracellular material rely on powdered activated carbon. You only need to dose it when you need it. It absorbs a wide range of compounds, including natural organic matter, which competes for absorption sites with our target compounds. You can vary dose. Talk to any operator, they hate using it, it's messy, it's awful stuff, and it's just a picture of a dosing unit in Iponga. Just some absorption data for different metabolites, MIB and geosmin. Geosmin's more effectively removed than MIB. Some data for Cylindrospermopsin, and also a couple of microcystin analogues, MLR and MLA. What you'll notice is MLA is really difficult to remove with absorption compared to MLR. So different metabolites have different absorption efficiencies. We've done work over the years. You can actually model the removal of these compounds onto activated carbon. So if you know the influent concentration, you can predict the dose of carbon to remove them for a known contact time in the treatment plant. What was recognised though, if you can dose the carbon prior to a coagulant, you can get a more efficient process. And just focusing on the graph C, for an influent concentration of geosmin at 25 nanograms per litre with a target of 5, by having a 30-minute contact time prior to coagulation, under these conditions of a 600 megalitre per day plant, and with a cost of about $700 per tonne, you can save, quite a bit of money in terms of having a pre-dosing tank for activated carbon. And that cost is going to vary depending on the size of the plant and your concentration of your target metabolite. But just highlighted the importance of having a pre-contact tank. So that was incorporated into the next batch of treatment plants that were built in the late 1990s in the Riverland on the River Murray. Now the number there is the order from Renmark to Taylor and Bend. You notice there's gaps between there because that's just the order. The next lot of treatment plants were built are in between those other plants, but I like to sort of keep the numbers so I know which one is in relation to the other. So they're run by Trility. Conventional process, and you can see the PAC contact tank at the head of the process. So they're all the same design, but just different sizes. An example of MIB removal from Swan Reach, some routine monitoring, influent MIB and product water, a little bit of problematic concerns there in the inlet product water, but when we looked at some data through the plant on one instance, you can see how that PAC contact tank is working there quite effectively. And there's a little bit of an increase. It's only a few nanograms per litre. It's not something I would be concerned with. So they work quite well. Phase 3 was what's called the Country Water Quality Improvement Water Treatment Plants from Glossop down to Kanmantoo. These are smaller than the other plants, and these are generally supplying local towns in the vicinity of that treatment plant. These are all ultrafiltration and granular activated carbon. By the time these plants were designed, we had a greater understanding of biodegradation of taste and odour compounds on media, and the price of membranes had come down as well, so it was a viable sort of process. Swan Reach Town, so there's a treatment plant at Swan Reach, which is in the vicinity of the town, but there's actually a treatment plant at the actual township. The Swan Reach treatment plant doesn't supply Swan Reach Town. There is a separate one for that, and that's just shown here. You've got submerged membranes, there's the GAC filters and treated water storage, some inlet water quality data and treated water quality data for some full-scale monitoring. So during this challenge event, lots of MIB, and you can see there's some extracellular material there as well that needed to be removed through an absorption or biodegradation process. Investigative sampling through the plant. Nothing really happens through the coagulation process or the ultrafiltration process. So you've still got dissolved material and in the post-ultrafiltration, and it's removed through the GAC, which would hope would occur. So what we're finding, even after 10 years of operation of these plants, we're getting effective absorption and biodegradation of taste and odour compounds. There's no need to replace this GAC yet. And we're routinely monitoring that. We pick 2 plants every year and we're just cycling through the 10 plants. We've treated, I think we've analysed about 7 of them so far. And it just shows the granular activated carbon from one of the media filters as a virgin material, and you can see the biofilm on the GAC from the filter. Just on biofiltration, we've got one really cool plant at Morgan, conventional process, built in 1986. You can see that there, an aerial view. Great treatment plant. Here's some routine monitoring data. There's nothing in the treated water. They do dose a little bit of activated carbon, but what we find is when we look at the product water after filtration, we don't get any MIB in. And if you look at the media, there's a nice layer of biofilm on there, and we get excellent biodegradation of the MIB and geosmin through this media filter. I just find it quite amazing. And there's a lot of work has been done looking at that process over the years. If it stopped tomorrow, based on all our data we have from routine monitoring, we probably would not be able to tell you why, unless someone put chlorine on it. But that's a really effective process at that treatment plant. It gives me confidence that we could do that at other conventional plants as well. That's just a picture of the media filters there. You can see how big they are with the operator there, Sam, collecting some media for a project that we had. It was quite a hot day. I remember he asked me if I had confined space training. I said, no, I don't, which meant he had to go in it himself. about 10 years ago. We used to climb down there ourselves, but obviously, yeah, levels of occupational health and safety have certainly improved since then, which is good. So in summary, phase 1, conventional process, yeah, we can optimise the process for cell removal, works well. We've got models that predict removal based on influent concentrations. Biodegradation only occurs at one plant, which is Morgan. They don't backwash their media filters with any disinfectant. Unfortunately, our metropolitan water treatment plants, they do apply chlorine to the media filters related to manganese removal. Phase 2, the Trility treatment plants, once again, we've optimised treatment for the cells. We've got models that predict removal. They've got the PAC contactor, which is more efficient for the removal of the extracellular material. Biodegradation is not possible because the design of those plants, it's, from what I understand from an engineering point of view, is a cheaper option or effective option to backwash with, just the head from the treated water storage tank, which has got chlorine or chloramines in it. So they've got disinfectant applied to those filters. I was told if we were going to put backwash pumps in and go with just non-disinfected treated water, it's quite an expensive option. So if they're going to design those plants, again, to take advantage of the biodegradation we see at Morgan, using the same source water, that's what I would recommend. The GAC, phase 3, the little QIP 3 plants, coag, ultrafiltration and GAC working fantastic. Still got biodegradation absorption after 10 years. To me, if I was going to build a treatment plant from scratch, even one of the larger ones, I like that process. Good solids removal with the membranes and excellent absorption and biodegradation on that GAC filter. So what's going to happen next? We're in the process of looking at upgrading the treatment plants that were built over 20 years ago as SA Water and all your water utilities. The customers become more forefront in terms of drinking water treatment and delivering a greater quality product in terms of safety and anaesthetics. So options could be ozone, GAC or GAC alone as we try and retrofit an additional process into those treatment plants. And also in South Australia is consideration of recreational access as well, which means we probably need a bit more log removal in terms of cryptosporidium. So for this project or work, I've just cobbled together works from a range of different projects. So acknowledgements of a whole range of different organisations and researchers that have contributed to the projects over a long period of time. So thank you.
Thank you, David. So do we have any questions for David? Any questions at all? No.
Hi, David. Just with all that experience on all those different treatment plants, could you make a comment about appropriate technologies depending on the size of the treatment plant? Like you said, biofiltration is really good, but if you backwash with chlorine, is there a limitation on what size treatment plants tend to be able to fit those different technologies?
I think there's probably no limit. I think the Queensland plants, land to shoot image flat, they're larger sized ozone GAC plants, so you could just put membranes instead. So to me, I don't see any limitation. Just when the Trility plants that I got, they backwash with chloramines that were built back in the late 90s. Yeah, we probably didn't have enough understanding of the impacts of the benefits of biofiltration at the time. If we had sort of known what we know now, probably pay a little bit more in the design and put backwash pumps in, because that's another barrier for taste and odour and toxin removal, which is demonstrated at Morgan, which is gets the same supply. But the only disadvantage of Morgan is it could stop any time, and we may not know why, because it's microbes, which from my understanding are difficult to understand for me anyway.
Thank you.